No one expected us to be here because no one expected the war to last this long.
As Russia's invasion of Ukraine enters year 3, Ukraine hangs on. Western leaders say their support is unwavering and offering billions in aid to prove it. But is it enough? Welcome to Your World Tonight. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Also on the program.
One of probably the most significant advances in healthcare in our country in decades. So it's very important that we get this right.
What's in and what's out in the new Pharmacare plan, as well as concerns about how it's going to happen and how much it's going to cost. Plus, riding the AI wave all the way to the top, how a record rally has made a chip maker one of the world's most valuable companies. Two years ago today, Russian missiles started falling on Ukraine, and troops moved in from the north, east, and south. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, what it calls a special military operation, has led to thousands of deaths, countless injuries, and the displacement of millions of Ukrainians. Tonight, our senior international correspondent, Margaret Evans, is in Kyiv, where Western leaders, including Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, continue to pledge support for Ukraine against Russia's aggression.
The lonely scrape of a strip of corrugated metal hanging from the husk of a bombed-out hangar at the Hostomel airport on the outskirts of Kyiv. Russia tried to land transport planes full of paratroopers here as part of an assault on the Ukrainian capital on the very first day of the war. But their plan was thwarted by fierce fighting from the Ukrainians. Today, it was the scene of a memorial hosted by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, with a moment's silence for Ukraine's fallen soldiers. It was also the first stop for Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who arrived on a surprise visit this morning.
Putin was sure he could easily take strategic targets like this airport. We are standing here today because he was wrong.
Zelensky said Hostomel was proof that Ukraine could defy expectations, many believing back then that the country wouldn't last a week against the Russian army. Trudeau travelled by train from Poland overnight, along with his Belgian and Italian counterparts and the President of the European Commission. All came bearing pledges of solidarity and more aid, and Trudeau signed a security cooperation pact with Ukraine, promising what Ottawa describes as critical financial and military support to the tune of $3.02 billion in 2024. But it didn't come with any firm dates for the delivery of already promised military hardware. Ukraine's counter-offensive against Russian forces stalled last fall, and Zelensky blamed the recent fall of Avdiivka to Russian forces on dwindling ammunition supplies. In the center of Kyiv, the mood was somber as Ukrainians remembered their losses, gathering in Independence Square to place small blue and gold flags bearing the names of the fallen. Liza Ruvakova is 22 years old.
Looking to all this, you can realize how much people died on war, and they try to defend us, and we just live in our lives.
Her boyfriend, Nikita Ivanov, fled the Donbass region when pro-Russian separatists took over parts of it in 2014. He knows he may be called up one day soon as Ukraine struggles to fill the ranks of its fighting force.
I do not know if it would be, but it could be. And as for now, I have a lot of friends in the army, and I just support them.
They believe fewer allies are supporting Ukraine than at the start of the war. But they are grateful nonetheless, they say, for the visits of foreign leaders during dark times. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Kyiv.
Meanwhile, Alexei Navalny's body has been handed over to his mother. The Russian opposition leader died just over a week ago in a penal colony. Russian officials claim it was from natural causes, but Navalny's family and Kremlin critics believe his death was orchestrated by President Vladimir Putin. Navalny's mother had said she was being pressured by officials to agree to a secret funeral or else he would be buried at the prison, but she refused. A family spokesperson thanked supporters who demanded authorities hand over Navalny's remains and says funeral arrangements are being made, but that it's unclear if authorities will interfere. Well, doctors and pharmacists are calling it a huge step forward for Canadian health care. The federal Liberal government and the NDP have struck a deal for a national Pharmacare program. And while contraception and diabetes medication will soon be covered, there are fears that some life-saving treatments may be left out. Nicole Williams reports.
This change should have happened a long time ago.
Dr. Nav Persaud is the Canada Research Chair in Health Justice. And for years, he's advocated for an end to what he calls the patchwork of public and private plans that have left many Canadians without drug coverage.
Many people have already suffered preventable strokes, heart attacks, because they couldn't afford these medicines. And sadly, some people have already died.
The federal NDP says it's struck a Pharmacare deal with the government, and legislation for a single-payer system will be tabled next week. It's expected to cover diabetes medication and birth control. Calgary-based physician and female health advocate Dr. Rupinder Tour says it's a major step forward for reproductive rights.
People are very, very clear with their reproductive goals, but what happens is they experience barriers when it comes to, implementing those goals.
Jen Belcher is a pharmacist based in Kingston, Ontario, and with the Ontario Pharmacists Association.
One of probably the most significant advances in healthcare in our country in decades. So it's very important that we get this right.
She says she still has many questions about exactly how this will roll out and worries about how public coverage might work for those already with private plans.
If this causes any sort of walk back or rollback of private coverage, this implementation could actually leave people with less coverage than they originally had.
The other concern is about how much this will all cost taxpayers. Mina Massey is a pharmacist in Scarborough.
Insurance companies shouldn't be getting a free pass. People who can afford their medication should have to pay for their medication, and we should reserve those funds for people who can't afford them.
Then there's the treatments Persaud says the current plan appears to be leaving out.
Ideally, all essential medicines would be publicly funded.
Medication for those with asthma and mental health disorders.
I think it could be a really important sign and the start of a really big change, but one that needs to come really quickly, and not just for people with diabetes or people who require access to contraceptives, but for everyone who requires a life-saving medicine.
Persaud says he hopes that will come as government rolls out the program. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Ottawa.
Still ahead, life after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In Mariupol, Ukrainians watch a Russian rebranding of their city, while more than 6,000 kilometers away, Ukrainians build a new life in St. John's. Those stories are coming up on Your World Tonight. Nikki Haley could be edged out on her home turf. The former South Carolina governor is the only remaining challenger to Donald Trump in the race for the Republican presidential nomination. Trump is expected to win tonight's primary in that state, just as he did in Iowa and New Hampshire. Paul Hunter reports from South Carolina tonight, where many GOP voters are asking why Nikki Haley is still in the race.
Good morning. Thank you.
Nikki Haley could not have sounded more optimistic.
Thanks so much.
Here in her home state, where she was once governor, on the day her fellow South Carolinians make their choice for the Republican nominee for the White House, and her name is on the ticket.
I always love Election Day. I think there's a lot of excitement, energy. You could tell South Carolinians are passionate. They're getting out and voting. That's what we want.
But Haley is expected to come a distant second to the candidate of choice for almost everyone we met elsewhere in this state, such as David Alderman.
How did you vote?
I voted for Donald Trump.
Why?
I thought he did a great job as president the last time.
He's the best one.
Or Tom Shea.
You just voted? Who did you vote for?
I voted for Mr. Trump.
Why? Why? It's very conclusive to me. I liked everything that he did. It's not a damn thing it's not a darn thing that he did that I didn't like.
And as we heard from Becky Hall, voting in Columbia, South Carolina, even some of those who voted for Haley, such as she, did so just to be nice.
I voted for Nikki Haley.
Why?
Because I didn't want her to be embarrassed in the state since she is a South Carolinian. I will vote for Trump after he beats her and runs in the general election.
And so it is, voters cast their ballots. A Trump victory here won't guarantee he'll be the party's nominee. And Haley has said she'll stay in the race no matter the outcome of today's vote, but this is seen as effectively her last stand. Failure to even dent Trump here would make it extremely complicated for Haley's chances going forward.
And we're going to have a tremendous victory.
For his part, Donald Trump spent last night courting some of South Carolina's African-American voters, suggesting in a speech his criminal indictments, he faces 91 felony counts, are part of his appeal to African-Americans.
I got indicted a second time, and a third time, and a fourth time. And a lot of people said that that's why the black people like me, because they have been hurt so badly and discriminated against. And they actually viewed me as I'm being discriminated against. It's been pretty amazing.
Haley quickly slammed Trump for the comments, calling them disgusting, and evidence Republicans would lose the presidential election if he becomes the party's nominee. Voters we met thought otherwise.
I'm a Trumper. I like the way he ran the country when he was president for 4 years. We need him back.
More primaries in other states will follow today's in South Carolina, but Trump has yet to lose even once. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Charleston, South Carolina.
The Canadian government says it's looking at new ways to get food and other much-needed aid into Gaza. The World Food Programme put a pause on aid deliveries earlier this week, saying a breakdown in civil order no longer allowed for safe distribution. Canada's International Development Minister, Ahmed Hussein, was on the Egyptian side of the Rafah border this week. Here is what he told CBC Radio's The House.
We're also looking at the possibility and the feasibility of actually making airdrops into Gaza. This is something that the Dutch government, as well as the British government and others, have done in collaboration with the Jordanian Air Force. It's something that we're seriously considering and looking at the feasibility of doing that and what it would take to do that.
Hussein says Ottawa is also awaiting results from the UN's investigation into UNRWA. Canada froze funding for the UN aid agency after Israel alleged several of its employees were involved in the October 7th Hamas attacks on Israel. Gaza health officials say at least 29,000 people have died in Gaza since the war began. It was supposed to cost $80,000. In the end, the price tag for the ArriveCan app ballooned to as much as $60 million. The federal government continues to face questions about how exactly that happened. Tom Parry reports from Ottawa.
The committee is meeting to consider matters related to the ArriveCan application. Reminder.
Even on a break week, the questions around ArriveCan didn't stop. MPs on a House of Commons committee that's looking at what went wrong during the app's development kept up their work.
Do you think taxpayers got good value for money with this app? It's a pretty straightforward question.
I think that what we were looking at when we were building it while I was there was how we could keep airports having people move through.
MPs like Conservative Michael Barrett questioning witnesses, including Antonio Utano and Cameron McDonald, two senior bureaucrats who worked on ArriveCan and who now say they've been wrongfully suspended without pay.
We had no idea where ArriveCan was going. We had no idea what it would turn into. And we were told, go get this done. We need to get something out there.
Both McDonald and Utano claim they're scapegoats in an elaborate scheme within the Canada Border Services Agency to protect those who are really responsible for ArriveCan going off the rails. It's a complicated web of conflicting stories, so complicated, in fact, that when Auditor General Karen Hogan released her report on ArriveCan earlier this month, she couldn't say for sure what the app cost taxpayers, though her best guess was just shy of $60 million.
This is probably some of the worst
financial record keeping that I've seen.
This whole episode has raised questions about the federal government's use of outside consultants for IT projects and other programs. With ArriveCan, the biggest contractor was a tiny Ottawa-based firm called GC Strategies. The two men who run the firm appeared before a parliamentary committee last year, but have turned down requests they come back to address the Auditor General's findings. That led the Conservatives and their House Leader, Andrew Scheer, to this week take an extraordinary step of putting forward a motion calling on the Sergeant-at-Arms of the House of Commons to order the company's partners to appear.
And it's unfortunate that it's come to this point, but it's essential that we use this tool if these individuals continue to ignore.
It's just one more matter for parties to consider, with questions around ArriveCan set to continue as MPs get back to work on Parliament Hill. Tom Perry, CBC News, Ottawa.
Since Russia's war on Ukraine began 2 years ago, more than 6 million Ukrainians have fled their homeland, according to the United Nations. About 4,000 of those refugees now call Newfoundland and Labrador home. Heather Gillis found out how they're adjusting to their new life.
Olena Holinska is learning English at the Association for New Canadians Language School in St. John's. Today's lesson, banking.
Interest, good.
Holinska came to St. John's from Kyiv in September 2022. Before that, Mariupol, where she left after a 2015 rocket attack.
And kill too much people.
Holinska's brother is still in Ukraine, a soldier wounded in an explosion in Bakhmut. She calls him a Ukrainian hero. And while her thoughts are still in Ukraine, Holinska says she is settling in here in Canada.
I have my class, learn English. I have a job. Yes, I have a job. After school, I am go to a job and I'm happy.
She's one of nearly 3,800 Ukrainians now living in Newfoundland and Labrador. The province created a Ukrainian family support desk in Poland with in-person staff to help people immigrate and find jobs, even chartering flights to bring people to the province, though more Ukrainian refugees are arriving on their own each month. People like Victoria Lamia Shonok, who arrived last May with her newfound friend Valentina Korzak. She came with her 3 children 4 months ago. Both have found jobs, but right now they call a Holiday Inn hotel their home while they're looking for housing in a tight and expensive rental market.
And I need a 3-bedroom house, and it's very expensive because salary not very high. But we really try.
According to the Association for New Canadians, 200 Ukrainians have arrived in Newfoundland and Labrador so far in February alone, and it expects many more in March. But there is uncertainty about what happens when that month ends and the federal government's emergency travel visa program expires. Elizabeth Arez is with the association.
You know, our clients are very nervous about what's going to happen, what comes next. And we can't give them answers at the moment. And, we just reassure them that we're there for them and we will be there to help them every step of the way. And
meanwhile, Olena Holinska knows one thing. She wants to stay in Canada forever.
It's my dream.
Heather Gillis, CBC News, St. John's.
What about next one, Olena?
And from new surroundings to familiar sights made unrecognizable, the city of Mariupol is undergoing a transformation. Days after Russia's full-scale invasion began, its forces completely surrounded the port city. The siege and bombardment lasted nearly 3 months. Now, thousands of construction workers are there, rebuilding Mariupol and rebranding it into a Russian city. Briar Stewart has that story.
In a video shared with CBC News, Irina walks around the mangled rubble that was her apartment in Mariupol. She points out where the fridge and cupboards used to be. Irina isn't her real name. We agreed not to identify her because she fears openly criticizing the Russian authorities who now control the strategic Black Sea city.
Nothing has changed for the better for me. Everything is just worse.
Irina's 25-year-old son was killed shortly after Russia's invasion began. She used to live with him in the apartment which he owned. Irina says she doesn't have the documents she needs to prove to Russian authorities that she's entitled to one of the hundreds of apartments they're building in the city.
The Russians here in the city see themselves as the czars, that they are so good, that they came here and liberated us. And they sure did that. They liberated us from anything and everything.
Russian officials say tens of thousands of construction workers are involved in rebuilding infrastructure in the 4 Ukrainian territories that Russia occupies. Reports on Russian state TV show smiling, grateful families moving into homes in Mariupol. This is a dream come true. Thank you, says one woman, who was interviewed for a report that aired in December 2022. A new luxury complex went up after the building that once stood there was destroyed and demolished. A few of its former residents protested that those apartments are now up for sale at prices they can't afford. Other residents have been told that their apartments are supposedly repaired, but a video posted online shows the units are still in shambles, with holes in the wall and broken concrete. Russia has dubbed Mariupol a city of military glory, and signs have been repainted in red, white, and blue, the colors of the Russian flag. Earlier this month, the country's deputy prime minister for construction claimed Russia had brought the city back to life. An offensive notion to Maria Chekh, who used to live in Mariupol and fought to defend it as part of the Azov battalion.
When Mariupol was Ukrainian, it was nice, beautiful city. Now it is graveyard with false attempt to rebuild.
According to Human Rights Watch, at least 8,000 people were killed in the fighting or from the war. Hundreds are believed to have died while sheltering in the city's theater, which was hit with a Russian airstrike. Today it's wrapped up in a construction barrier as crews work to rebuild on top of the ruins. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
This is Your World Tonight. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. You can hear Your World Tonight wherever you are. Just subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app or download the CBC Listen app. You'll get the best from CBC Radio, CBC Podcasts, and CBC Music. The artificial intelligence boom is sending computer chip maker NVIDIA into the stratosphere. The 30-year-old company is mostly known for its graphics cards used in video game consoles and personal computers. But it reached new heights when its chips started to power the AI revolution. They're used in training and operating AI systems like ChatGPT. Now, NVIDIA's market capitalization is sitting just below $2 trillion, which is nearly equal to the entire Canadian economy. Senior business reporter Anis Haydari tells us more. So, Anis, what's going on?
This all started after NVIDIA reported its earnings earlier in the week. They were a lot higher than analysts expected, and it also indicated there's a lot of demand out there for the company's products. But maybe not the products a lot of people might initially think of. NVIDIA has been getting into artificial intelligence. This is a company that's been established for years, but they mostly focused on computer graphics. Like a lot of home computers will use NVIDIA chips to drive games. One version of their products was actually in Nintendo Switches.
Okay, but this seems like a big jump, going from graphics cards in a Nintendo to artificial intelligence computing that is worth trillions. How did this happen?
I posed that question to Emil Savov. He works with the Mars Discovery District in Toronto. And he says NVIDIA realized the type of graphics chips that it made were better able to handle AI programming when compared to more general regular processors. So NVIDIA focused on that advantage. He says that's why they are the leaders now, financially speaking.
NVIDIA was able to kind of detect perhaps ahead of its competitors the trend that was evolving in AI. So that gave them a really big head start and a dominant position in the market today.
Huh. And so is NVIDIA the only company that's doing this?
They aren't the only ones, but they are one of the biggest chip makers doing this right now, especially after this run-up in their company's value. Barry Schwartz is Chief Investment Officer with Baskin Wealth Management.
NVIDIA has, I think, an 80% market share. Really no competition at the moment, and they think we're just getting started.
There are other players that are moving into this space, and there are existing competitors to NVIDIA as well. But they all didn't start on the AI thing as early as NVIDIA did, which is why now they are not worth more than the whole Canadian economy. Don't count out these big guys, though. Companies like Google, Microsoft, Meta, they are of similar, if not bigger size, and they don't sit on the sidelines for this stuff, though they also leverage and use NVIDIA chips and technology, too.
Mm-hmm. What does this mean for prices?
So right now, there is more demand than there is supply for the kind of chips that NVIDIA makes. It's part of why their company's stock is going up. People expect sales to keep going up, and prices will keep going up too because there's demand, but there's limited supply. But competitors are also going to be growing and popping up here. I mean, they see this money in the pot. They see the writing on the wall. But at this point, Emil Savov thinks prices will stay high.
Costs many billions of dollars to build new manufacturing capacity for these specialized chips. So for the next while, there's still going to be tight supply, not crisis level, but there's going to be a bit of a waiting list, shall we say.
This doesn't mean prices for the average consumer will go up yet. This kind of stuff is mostly purchased by big business to power their gigantic AI systems. But of course, as things get more expensive for businesses in the back end, that can eventually affect what consumers can buy, period, and how much it costs. For now, consumers might not see a direct impact unless they are an NVIDIA investor, in which case they have made a lot of money over the last few days.
Oh, well, happy days for those people. Thank you so much, Anis.
You're welcome.
That's Anis Haydari in Calgary. We want to end our program tonight with a tribute to a colleague and friend who gave so much to CBC News and to our show, James Murray.
More than 20 years ago on Parliament Hill, Nelson Mandela made his affection for Canada clear. Sitting on a bench, a young couple holding hands, as couples do. By the marina, a family snaps photos on phones. Sports is a big draw, so too, it seems, is sports media.
James died this morning in Nova Scotia at the age of 59 due to complications from cancer. He was surrounded by his family. James was a natural-born storyteller, and he caught the news bug early, landing his first on-air gig at a radio station in the Maritimes at just 14 years old. Even then, his sights were set on the CBC, where he would spend 3 decades as a writer, reporter, host, and producer. James was passionate about public broadcasting and known around here for being a master of his craft. He covered every kind of story for every major CBC News program, including The National, World Report, World at 6, and The World This Weekend, with his signature wit and impeccable tone.
It's been just a few months since Canada had its sweet spring fling with the Toronto Raptors and superstar Kawhi Leonard. Remember?
Susan, this apology was big enough to be broadcast here from the House of Commons live across the land.
It, Nina Kolo soon learned, was the late-night test of a new Toronto streetcar. Low to the ground, red, sleek, and chic.
Behind the scenes, James was a mentor and a friend, always willing to give guidance or share a joke, an opinion, or a juicy story. With James, there was no such thing as a quick stop and chat. He had a seemingly bottomless well of knowledge on every subject and an unparalleled way with words.
Mackenzie King, who once wrote that God and his destiny called him to lead the nation. The nation wasn't so sure about King, who delivered 2 kinds of speeches, long and longer.
Even after retirement in 2021, James couldn't stay away for long, returning to the air often, including a long run as host of The World This Weekend.
And that's the last uppercut you're going to get from The World This Weekend tonight. I'm James Murray. Thanks for going a few rounds with us tonight. And yes, we've switched to boxing metaphors. Gloves up, and good night.
So goodbye, and thank you, James. You'll be missed. And thank you at home for being with us on Your World Tonight this Saturday, February 24th. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Good night.